Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Labor. I'm a sales manager for Secura Insurance in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. This is Jeff Bykowski, training Secura. We were asked to come here today by Covera Insurance out of Sparta, Holmen, and Toma. We write a fair amount of campgrounds in and around the state of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan. Campgrounds is a niche business for us in our specialty lines department. Again, this should be interactive. I am not a public speaker. I'm a sales manager that calls on producers such as Eric Hahn, who I think many of you in the room probably know Eric. So my interactions daily are between my company, the carrier, Secura Insurance, and agencies such as Covera Insurance. So again, this is kind of, for lack of a better word, a stump the chump session. What that means is that if you've had an insurance-related question that you have always wanted to ask and never had the presenter in front of to try to stump, feel free. I cannot guarantee that I know the answer, but I can guarantee I will try. And if I don't know the answer, we'll write it down and we'll send out an email form or something on a question that I may or may not be able to answer, or Mr. Bykowski can jump in and possibly bail me out. So I'm assuming most of the people in the room are campground owners, is that correct? Everyone? Very good. Just check. I didn't know if, some vendors are trying to steal my material. I thought I'm just checking it out, So we're all campground owners. I appreciate that.
And who here enjoys their insurance renewal time?
Isn't it great? Let's hear it for Eric Hahn and insurance renewals. So, absolutely. See, that's why we're here, to try and make the mundane fun. Insurance is a tough gig. I started my career at Secura 16 years ago, and in the claims department. I did 10 years as a senior field claims rep in Eau Claire. Actually, I called on several campgrounds with tornado-related claims, tree damage, water damage from backups, anything and everything you could imagine that would happen in the field. I called on approximately 4,000 claims in about a span of 10 years. When my predecessor retired, I saw what he did, and I saw what I did, and I said I should try to do this. So I tried for the sales manager role, and that was about 8 years ago, and it is better. That's all I have to say about the claims. Obviously, as you know, I'm sure there's people in the room that have had a claim. They can be difficult from a coverage perspective and adversarial, even with a carrier that is there to support you, because as you know, you can run out of limit. There could be a building that was not scheduled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're just here to go through the claims process a little bit. I'll kind of jump around. There's no formal outline. I'll go back to some of the claims that I had when I was a younger man, specifically involving campgrounds and resorts. I would assume that some people in the room might have a quasi-campground resort combo versus just campground or just resort. The beautiful part, Secura Insurance writes both. So we do campgrounds and resorts, which is a nice synergistic effect.
Can I jump in real quick before we get to boring stuff?
Go, sir.
Fun stuff.
Absolutely.
Everybody should have a whole bunch of stuff in front of them. This here is a little flower pot, right? You put it on your windowsill. Inside of there's seeds and dirt and instructions. And my daughter and I tried it, and I kill everything but this group. So hopefully for you guys it does as well. If not, let us know. I'll get you a new one. But everybody wants a little flower pot, right, guys?
Spring is coming. Spring is coming.
These are, Yeti Arctic type cups that will keep ice cubes cold for a long time. They'll keep hot stuff hot for a long time. But that's not what makes them cool. What makes them cool is that they are perfectly fitted to be can koozies. So you can put your beer, your soda in there, or your V8 for breakfast juices, and V8 and vodka, Bloody Mary mix.
This gentleman would like one right here, Jeff. Absolutely. What color? What color?
Oh, sorry, sir. You must have gone. Sorry. If you got in here. Oh, we got extra. No, we got one. If you don't have one, let me know. He was back there. I apologize if you came in and I missed you. I apologize.
So again, back to we'll start out claims process. Obviously, you guys know when you have a claim, you call it in. The quicker you call it in, the better it is. That's self-explanatory, but I had many claims that were late reported where we had a tornado and it went through 5 days ago, and then we get the claim turned in 5 days ago, I understand that you're probably working to fix any of the damage that you had at said campground. However, fixing it before having someone look at it makes the evaluation more difficult. So obviously, prompt notification is very important in any claim, property and obviously automobile especially. The ancillary claims that come from that, such as earnings and extra expense, data breach, obviously not as paramount of an importance to report them quickly, but property and auto, very important that the adjuster gets contacted quickly. Of course, being you guys are in the field, I was a property rep in the field, so of course I had a territory. That territory was western Wisconsin, give or take 2 hours from Eau Claire. Obviously, when there's a tornado, for instance, there's multiple claims. Secura has its own staff adjusters, as do most companies. However, at a time where there's hundreds or even thousands of claims, we will have to use IAs on occasion. So an IA is an independent adjuster, does not work for Secura, but will do the preliminary damage scope and report back to a Secura associate for payment. They will work with you to estimate the damages and get to an agreed price. However, they have no binding authority to do so. They have to work with an adjuster side by side to come to that final pricing. So again, just from a claims process perspective, the other thing, when I keep going back to tornadoes because, of course, we had tornadoes in western Wisconsin in 2017. Thankfully, I was not an adjuster at that time. I was a sales manager, so we had sold much more premium, which, of course, translates to many more buildings, and the adjusters were very busy. I did fill in on occasion for those claims, but I'll cite one. We had a campground. We'll call it north of Eau Claire, and direct hit on a tornado, had approximately 30 vehicles that were damaged by trees falling on top of the vehicles. These campers are your bread and butter. They pay you to stay at your establishments, correct? And we're upset. There was probably 7 out of the 30 that had nice vehicles with no comprehensive coverage. Comprehensive is first-party coverage to the vehicle owner, and they thought that said campground should pay for the damage to the vehicles. That is not a covered cause of loss for a campground. You guys do not insure the trees. You do own said trees, but there is no coverage for a tree falling on a 2000 and, at that time, 15 Silverado. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, so the dead or alive trees, if it was a nuisance, publicly reported to you or an authority that it was dead and should be taken down prior, you can get into liability. You would have to be negligent in order for that tree to cover that vehicle which was damaged. Now, as you know, if you go around the woods, there are dead limbs in most trees. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about a 100-foot oak that has been dead for many years that you have maybe even said around a campfire, we should take that tree down, and haven't got to it. It just hasn't been paramount. Well then, if there's negligence on the part of our campground owner, yes, then our liability coverage would pay for that damage to that vehicle. It is an uphill climb. And I would say, first party, you should turn it into your comp carrier first. And then if they feel that there's subrogation potential to come back after said carrier, we would pay them. But they would need to prove that fact. And it has been done. I've had a few, more so not so much on the campground setting, but on neighbors. So we have a neighbor, tree, it's dead. This neighbor says, hey, cut your tree down, it's gonna fall on my car. He doesn't, he won't. They go to the city. Of course, the police are always called, but the police are not meant for a civil matter. They're meant for a criminal matter. So, of course, they say you have to go somewhere else. If it is reported to the city, and they say, hey, you should take this tree down, and that tree falls on a car, yes, then you're talking negligence, and there could be liability under your GL to pay for the damage to the car. In general, there won't be, and the first-party coverage for the other than collision coverage on the vehicle will pay for that. So again, the majority had comprehensive coverage and understood it. The people who didn't, there was one gentleman in particular, a 2015 Chevy Silverado, it was 2017, so approximately a $40,000 truck, and a fairly large tree fell between the box and the cab, bent the frame, it was totaled. And he was unhappy. So of course, when they're unhappy, the adjusters sometimes tend to call me. And so, everything went fine except for this one gentleman. So of course, I, being close proximity in Eau Claire, I drove out to try to assist if possible. There was no coverage. It was a perfectly beautiful tree beforehand. There was a lot of damage and $40,000 out-of-pocket payment. In the end, after a lot, I think I was there approximately 3 hours, a lot of cursing at me, which is fine. I have thick skin. That's the beautiful part. He came around to understand. He did call his attorney while we were there, and his attorney said exactly what I did and exactly what you did. Was the tree dead, and should it have taken it down? And it was a nice, beautiful, leafed-out tree. No. So again, I just bring it up. Claims examples are kind of obviously add a little excitement to this topic of insurance. Yes, sir. Uh-huh.
Many of us probably deal with hopeful, where literally a tree could be green in the spring and dead in June.
Yes, sir.
And so if that were to occur with something like that, there's no way I can respond to every tree taking it down that shrub. I mean, if it's sitting there for years and years and years, yes, my responsibility.
Correct.
That happens within a year or so,
We always use the reasonable person doctrine. Would a reasonable person, if you multiple years you knew it was dead, it's leaning over a roadway or where your campers park their vehicles, yes, you're getting into that negligence area and then you're liable for the loss. But again, oak wilt, as you know, I mean, some of them, we went to Dutch elm was the same, right? Now we have emerald ash borer. There's various trees dying every year. So I agree with you. You're not expected to keep up with all the trees in the woods. But again, on something that's rotten, and you know it's rotten, and it just took a back seat, if it took a back seat for a summer, that's reasonably probably okay. 2 summers is probably not. If multiple campers came back and said, oh yeah, it's the same tree, and there's a little bit of a giggle around the fact that, well, we were talking about that last year and it's dangerous, the safety of your campers is paramount to you. So in the off season, taking it down, you'd be fine, I think. Now granted, I use a disclaimer that you and I could be sued for anything. I mean, no matter if you think you're right or not, an attorney may take that case. The gentleman in the pickup, he never did get an attorney. He understood, I think, where he sat. And of course, the tough part was I wouldn't call him a close personal friend, but I would call him a friend of the campground owner. And said campground owner said, hey, is there anything we can do? And it's kind of a door that's open or it's closed, right? There's not I'll give you $15,000 for a $40,000 truck. It just doesn't work. You kind of have to be firm and fair. So that one, again, like you said, it went away. It took 3 hours, a couple of phone calls after that. Actually, a phone call to my CEO, who subsequently explained said coverage as well and said, we apologize, but unfortunately, acts of God are not covered by insurance, negligence. If there is somebody to take it up to, God. Yes, sir. Acts of God for liability. The entire tree.
But in the process, it definitely hit somebody. If it's been reported to somebody?
If it has been reported to somebody and it is not long-standing, if it's 1 week and you're saying you're noticing a tree limb that's dying, much different than it's a dead tree limb. Oh, so we're talking a broken off piece that's hung up in the tree, widowmaker, another portion of a branch from a different tree. Yes, well, so that's, again, so now we're doing nuances of the same general topic, right? That is a known hazard. It is not a dead tree, it's a widowmaker. Now we have to mitigate our losses. We have to take care of said tree as soon as possible. So if reasonable, this is just me in a classroom with you guys, maybe a month to get it down, or just take the whole tree down like you did in the end. But yes, you could be held liable for a widowmaker that you're aware of, definitely.
Yeah, some of our largest claims at Secura are tree branches. One of our largest workers' compensation claim is a Jimmy John's delivery person delivering on a bike in downtown Chicago. A tree limb randomly just fell on them, and it's millions and millions of dollars for workers' compensation claim.
Yes, caught him on the back of the neck, right place, right time perfectly, and killed him instantly while he was delivering sub sandwiches on a bicycle. You know, it's a freak accident.
What is the deal now that there should be, you've heard this, there should be a price for it. One time, the Bush administration said $250,000 for medical liability per person. That makes no sense at all. But $1 million maybe, or $2 million, and now you get these things going where
Yes, there is no statute that says, hey, a tree limb killing somebody is this amount. Work comp has some of that with, you know, your thumb on your dominant hand is worth a certain amount. Yes, sir, absolutely. And that, so we'll tangent with that terrific question, the liability limits into umbrella. It's not that I want more of your premium, although that is the nice portion. It does protect you above and beyond your underlying limits. So whether or not you have an umbrella, if you want one, a gentleman such as Eric Hahn can help you with one. I, of course, recommend one. I always use myself as an example. I'm just a lowly sales manager, but I have a $2 million umbrella, personally, on my homeowners. That homeowner's umbrella, I include myself in my UM and UIM. So my uninsured and underinsured motorists, I include myself. What that means is I have 500 split limits on my personal lines policy, and if someone was to hit me, and my vehicle, my wife and 2 boys are in there, and they hurt all of us, I can basically go after my own carrier for the 20% of people that are on Wisconsin roads that are uninsured. So I don't know how many include themselves or do not. It's your choice, your decision. But if you're paying for an umbrella, the BI limit above your underlying, you're paying for the damage you do to someone else. Your negligence. You slip through an intersection, you hit a busload of kids, you hurt 3 of them, and it's $1.2 million. We will pay that up to your underlying, and if you have an umbrella, to $1.2 million. If you have underlying of 500 and an umbrella of $1 million, you have $1.5 million in coverage. So that technically would be 300 light from your limit. In that same scenario, you're going home from school, and somebody runs into you, your wife, and your 2 kids, and hurts you. If you are not included in your UM and UIM, your own carrier won't pay you. So think about that. The gentleman who caused the accident runs into you. It's his fault. He's uninsured or has low limits, puts $100,000 to damage into each of you, has 100, 300. 100 is the max per person, 300 is the max per occurrence. You're going to be 100,000 light on just the underlying, and maybe that's just pure medical, meaning that maybe you have a broken leg and can't work for 6 months. So that, again, if you're included in your UIM and UIM into your umbrella, you can collect from your own carrier to that policy limit, which mine, obviously being in claims, seeing 4,000 claims, is $2.5 million. That's what I pay for. I pay a fair amount of extra money. It's about $430 a year for my umbrella to be included in a UM and UIM. I just bring it up because he had kind of transitioned into the underlying versus an umbrella. I don't know how many people in the room have an umbrella, but is there for your help.
is that interest for her to be included in your umbrella, or is it just something that you didn't tell your insurance carrier, I want to be covered in my umbrella, you may not put it on?
It needs to have a signed rejection form. So you are, when you leave the agent's office, you will either be covered or uncovered. If you are uncovered, you will have signed a rejection form.
So I should assume that umbrella is covered. So the uninsured, underinsured voters getting
Eric, do you have more comments that when he leaves? It is personal lines, yes. I just brought it up because, of course, we were talking about liability. Yes. Yes. If you're going to buy an umbrella, all I'm saying is that even personal lines, you guys all have your campground, but you have personal lines as well. Some people live on the campground, so it's all under their business. I understand that. But if you have personal lines and you're willing to pay for an umbrella for the damage to somebody else's stuff, why wouldn't you pay for it for the damage to your family? That's all I'm saying. So, food for thought. Yes, sir.
One quick question, too much of the time maybe we have to talk after this and such.
Yeah, no problem.
Something happened at my campground last year, and I found out the hard way that our dump station, who somebody backed over and crushed it, it was not covered by campground insurance because it was not connected to a building. It was a standalone subterranean septic system.
Okay, and how, if it's subterranean, how, they backed over the top of it and collapsed it?
They backed over the cover, and they set the camper on top of it, and there was no system, and there was, but they collapsed the system. They collapsed the tank. The camper was in the tank, literally.
Wow.
Now, the camper, the people who had the camper insurance, their insurance covered the crane to come and take it out and everything like that. Yeah, there's no-
To remove their camper.
They weren't even able to drive out, they were.
But the driver of the vehicle, who was not the owner of the camper, his insurance turned around and told me it was my issue because it was a sinkhole, which wasn't a sinkhole before that. So I'm fighting that litigation right now.
Okay.
But the long and short of the whole thing is when I went to my insurance, back to my insurance company, they looked at it and said, well, yeah, no, should be no problem. And then he came back and said, wait a second, is that connected to a building anywhere? Is it connected to anything? No, it's a standalone dump station, septic system, that's it. And I checked with numerous insurance companies after that, and this is just FYI for everybody. Unless it's connected to a building, it may not be covered. I talked to 6 different insurance carriers, and they all told me it was not covered.
Yeah, so it isn't. Because connected to a building,
If it was connected to a building, it's covered.
yes, exactly. Connected by even a sewer line to a building, it is covered.
But it's a standalone dump station, not connected to a building, and something happens to it like that.
Not automatically covered.
Not automatically, so we could schedule it.
You could schedule it.
Yes, sir. For, obviously, that's extra premium, but we wouldn't have that. Absolutely.
But it is considered connected if you have a septic line running from the bathhouse next door.
Yeah, it's connected.
Yes, connected by even an electrical line that connects something can be considered part of a building or other structures. Yes.
But the long and short of the whole thing is right now is that, when doing this whole thing, the insurance company of the vehicle that was pulling the camper was supposedly liable for it. And I talked to the insurance company at that point, which I won't say the name, but within 15 minutes of conversation with him, no adjuster, no pictures, no nothing, denied the claim. Over the phone. Because he said it was your problem, it was your sinkhole. It wasn't a sinkhole before that.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking sinkhole is a collapse. We were different cause of loss.
Told me that they would have paid that claim with no problem whatsoever.
Under the liability side of the driver, correct?
This unnamed company, this is who you're in litigation with?
Actually, right now, we're in litigation with the driver of the vehicle.
Okay. And is this a really quick and fun and satisfactory process for you?
No, let's just say it's, I'm taking it in the short, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because I gotta replace the entire system.
Well, and probably retain an attorney?
I have to reread my attorney also.
Yes, okay.
Does the insurance company pay for you to sue the guy? Does the insurance company pay for it?
We would pay for your defense if I was the guy that did it,
Yes,
but I won't pay to chase the guy who did.
yeah, I'm the one chasing, I'm the one who wants to be made right.
Now, so this is kind of how this usually goes. All these tangents come up. All I'll say is, so this loss you have, that dump station,
Yeah.
I don't know how old it was.
Well, the long and short of the whole thing is that with my, with the attorney, somebody I've been working with, and he's fantastic. But the long and short of the whole thing is that we've talked to the court commissioner and stuff like that, now they're bringing up liability and stuff, and was he negligent? And whose negligence and stuff like that.
Was it clearly marked? Did he know where to park? That kind of stuff.
Nevertheless, he backed up right over the cover.
Yeah.
The cover was right there, and the guy, when he backed up over it, when I walked over, I said, what was going on? Well, I was wondering why you had a fire pit ring right next to your dump station. I said, it's not a fire pit ring, that's covering the hole I mean, it's covering the clean out.
Wow.
So we back up over it, not realizing it, and then we collapsed it. And it was an older system, I understand that, but, it's not helping me throughout the entire season. Now I don't have an upstation.
Absolutely. The reason I bring up the older system is a thing to remember is that your guys' first-party coverage written by Eric through us is typically RCV. Remember, on a third-party basis, replacement cost valuation, replacement cost coverage. What it costs to replace it is what I'm going to pay to the design limit. This gentleman that backed over your station, by law, only owes ACV. So if it's $25,000 to replace it, it's 10 years old, has a 20-year useful life, you're getting half.
And that-
Just,
that's where-
just food for thought for everybody in the room.
That's where it's been going underneath with the, court case. We said, well, it is an old system, blah, 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 so now we're looking at X amount of dollars versus that. I'm still gonna be,
You-
I'm not gonna be made 100% by any way, shape, or
You will, definitely not. The law dictates that you will be made short ACV.
now it's not even gonna go to full court case, it's gonna go to small claims, because now it's underneath that umbrella.
Yeah, underneath that, probably 10,000 or whatever that limitation is. Yes. So I just bring it up, the valuation, lots of people get upset when somebody damages your property that was very valuable to you, and a new one is 10 grand, but it's 5 years old and you only get 5. That is the law of the land. There is no way to argue that.
The only one thing I just wanna offer is, everybody who has that, if they have a standalone system, it's not connected to another building,
Please schedule it.
please schedule it, because, and I did check, it didn't make sense to me, so I literally called like 6 different companies, insurance companies, and everyone gave me the exact same.
Yes, sir.
Not being covered because it's not connected to a structure.
Yes.
That's probably true, right, for a lot of the property in the open, like light poles and things along those lines, those also need to be, scheduled on your policy as property in the open.
Yes, and again, under our rider, our wrap, that, the universal wrap that usually Eric sells on every campground, you have those ancillary coverages that would cover light poles, smaller stuff, not $25,000, absolutely. So just food for thought, again, if you had the problem, it's possible that another campground owner within will have a similar issue, hence the reason for the time with you today. So I feel like, we all get to learn together. Yes, subterranean is more difficult.
Yeah, in fact, the agent I usually work with, I've been working for decades, he's a ground system, it's even hard to find coverage for that because of the way it's set up. Yeah, some people write insurance for underground tank.
Underground tank is tough if whatever is in it. Doesn't matter if it's, obviously fuel is outside of a whole different scenario, but
You asked a bunch of underwriters, they all said no tanks.
Yeah, they just don't underground things like that, water tanks or whatever.
sir?
So you said the sewer line has to be connected to a building. How about the water? A water line?
A water line connecting an adjacent structure, will that bring coverage?
The water line going to your dump station. In the building.
Subterranean, I think subterranean is specifically excluded.
That tank was collapsed and stuff like that. But as far as, the water lines being connected, because you have water lines there for clean outs and such, and granted, it's not potable.
Yes.
But stuff, it's all water line. It's still part of the water system, it's not gonna be, that's not going to connect it to a structure.
Typically, specifically described. If the building is specifically described or whatever was ran into, you can get coverage. Subterranean is kind of a one-off that carriers do not like to cover. Because of, as you know, the clearly marked, you guys have between 30 and 5,000 sites, and if there's an individual on each one, the potential to run it over is there daily.
It is, it was there, and it was clearly marked and such, but again, it all depends on how you want to define clearly marked.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the negligence that comes with being liable. I mean, are you liable? Well, again, he's going to argue that, well, he didn't have it clearly marked. Well, you didn't even think it was subterranean. You thought it was a fire ring. Not that he should have backed over a fire ring either. I mean, you shouldn't back over, try not to back over anything typically, but it turns out that it's more money because it's a dump station. Yes. And so we'll transition that to valuations. Just a side tangent. It is important, I'm sure you guys have been told this, but it is important to keep your valuations on your buildings current. Co-insurance is a very, very, very bad deal because of the fact it makes the claim so adversarial. When I was a younger man, I only had 2 in my career where I had co-insurance penalties applied. And you can imagine that if you guys are paying for a $50,000 limit on a building, and I come and tell you that, yes, it's totaled, and you think it's worth 50, but I'm only going to give you 37, that is not a good conversation. It's adversarial. But the co-insurance penalty, you have to be insured to 80%. I don't like 80 personally because with inflation, 3 or 4 years goes by at 4%, and you were at 80 3 years ago. Today, you're at 72. That 8% co-insurance of what you should have had it insured for, maybe 65,000, you're not going to get your scheduled limit. So it's important to sit through an annual review with an insurance agent, such as Eric Hahn, and review your buildings. I understand that you guys could have hundreds of buildings, and it is a big undertaking. Yep.
I had a similar thing. Luckily, I got out of it without much of an issue.
Yes, sir.
We had an abandoned septic tank built out of steel.
Okay.
We had the septic redone, and the tank was abandoned, but it was not filled in. As the owner, I assumed when we hired them that they were gonna
Do it correctly.
take care of the old tanks. They never did.
Oh.
We had a car parked over it, and the side of the tank collapsed, and car went right down into the corner of the car went right down in, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why wasn't this filled in? Who technically was,
Well-
was it like, because it may not have been in the contract that the people who put our septic in, or put our new tanks in?
Yes, sir.
I guess it's kind of a blur in my mind, who's responsible for that? I had no idea that it didn't get filled in. I was assuming it did, but I guess it falls on me because I shouldn't assume anything, right?
Well, you were assuming that your contractor get a good deal. It's almost to the level of construction defect. Are you responsible for the defects of the contractor on your property? Well, you have premise liability. That premise liability says that you're going to have a safe environment for your campers. And yes, it technically is your contractor's fault. I don't know how many years were different, but there are statutes, property damage in the state of Wisconsin is 6 years that you can go back to collect from the contractor. Now, if said contractor has insurance, and so this will give me another tangent, and is still in business. You don't know. So again, it does go to you guys that you have to provide that safe environment for your campers. We would probably pay it and then try to subrogate because, to make it smoother. However, if, again, the replacement cost ACV, I'm not going to give them something brand new. I'm going to get them something that they had on a monetary basis from a valuation perspective. So it's tough. It is not going to be a perfect settlement. And that, of course, creates the adversarialness. Yes, sir. Yes, absolutely.
Can I go back to the 80% you were talking about? So you got a bathhouse, just build it, costs you $50,000. You insure it for $50,000. You get hit by a tornado. Are you gonna come in and pay me 80% of the $50,000?
No, sir. We want you to have that building insured within 80% of 50,000. So you could technically insure that building for 40 and still get, because you're within you won't get a penalty there. What we prefer to avoid is underinsuring anything. Insure it to value so that you're paid what it's worth. And you guys are probably handy. Some of you guys put up your own buildings, and that's completely fine. But remember, you putting it up is not a contractor putting it up. And a contractor will have profit and overhead, taxes, work comp, all those ancillary expenses that will drive up the cost of the building. So just make sure to go through it at least annually. I know it's, when your renewal's coming up, you're like, I have 50 buildings and I have to make sure that they're within, yes, that is part of the annual review. Now, if a building in the same way is actual cash value, you don't have to worry as much. That actual cash value limit, there's not a co-insurance penalty applied to actual cash value. So if you have an older bathhouse, same bathhouse, but it's 20 years old, and you're completely fine with $50,000 on that bathhouse, but to rebuild it new is $100,000. If you put $50,000 on it, that's absolutely fine, but you're only ever going to get $50,000. So just know that the difference in the valuations is important. And that should have been a very open and honest conversation with the insurance carrier, your agent, and yourself.
Ryan, you mentioned
Absolutely. Yeah, so we're typically not short. Inflation guards anywhere, depending on the policy, from 2 to 6%. So that should keep up. But if you, again, insure at 80% and live in an area where inflationary pressure is higher and only have 2%, after 5 years, the building could be underinsured, at which time you will incur the deductible and the coinsurance penalty, which will make you unhappy. So just food for thought. The other, yes.
That scenario you gave with the $50,000 building that's 20 years old and the actual replacement cost $100,000 now, you're actually well below the 80%.
You are, and that's fine on an ACV basis.
And so you wouldn't get the 50,000, right? You would get the 50,000 plus the penalty.
If it was RC, you would get the penalty applied to the 50. You would not get the 50, you would get a proportion of the 50. ACV, you would get the full 50. Because you're self-insuring that portion above the 50 on an actual cash value basis. The valuation, how you have it set up, is important. There is no coinsurance on ACV, only coinsurance on RCV. The replacement cost stuff, we want to make sure that we're getting adequate premium for the building so that there's not premium leakage, to be quite honest. You know, I mean, if it's a $100,000 building, please insure it for 100. You could insure it for 90. I'm okay at 90. I would not insure it for 80. That's just my opinion. And again, because I don't know your inflationary pressures in each of your zip codes, I don't know at which time that 80% would be 78, 72. You know, if it was 20 years. I mean, I have come across.
With RCV, if you have it insured below the value, below the 8% mark, you won't ever achieve your number that is.
You will never get your limit. Absolutely right. If you are under the 80% co, you will never get your scheduled limit. The penalty will reduce that limit, whatever percent. So what we would do is figure the value of the building, the 100.
I would say, yeah, with the 50/100,
Yes.
it would actually be 25.
It would be a breakdown, yes. 20% on 50,000, it would be about 50 on 100, but the coinsurance penalty wouldn't drop it that far. It wouldn't drop at 50%. Yeah, 25 to 30 is where I would guess, without putting pen to paper. It's not a straight line depreciation on it. Yep.
It's really a bad deal to be underinsured.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it,
Number 50, you're expecting something close to that.
yes. And it is fine to be underinsured on an older building that you know is insured at actual cash value. That's absolutely fine. It is not if it's an older building that's in very good condition that you think you have RC on. That's where the problem comes in. And then I come in and tell you, so now you're already a little underinsured, right? You're building that you think you're getting 50, you know is worth 100, you insured it at replacement cost, and you're only getting 25. That is a very tough conversation.
This is a standard practice within the built-in insurance world. You know, Ryan called it the co-insurance penalty. The reason why that's built in is, you know, to incentivize you guys, the customer, to, you know, report the accurate building value. The building value is how the premium is based upon. And if you have a higher limit, but the value is, you know, established at a lower rate.
Well, if you got a good agent, you never.
There you go. A good agent that does.
Yes, sir. That is important. The annual review is important. And again, you guys, I'm assuming that buildings have been built without calling an agent. I know because I came across many. Remember, when a building under construction is not covered unless it has a builder's risk policy. So if you're building a new building, there is no coverage on that building till it's completed, and you've called an agent and said, I have a $100,000 building that I just built. And your agent will get nervous because he's like, well, who built it? And during that whole course of construction, maybe it was 3 months, maybe it was 6 months, there's no coverage on that building without a builder's risk policy.
And it turns out that the builder can actually not realize that he's not covered on his end either.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, typically, I assume Eric would agree with me, I typically try to push the builder's risk back to the GC. Who's ever doing the work, make it his problem. Because why do you want to... Yes, sir. Eric, do you have, I mean, from a pricing perspective, I don't do much with price. Is a builder's risk policy during the course of construction more or less than the completed policy premium?
So you're really just starting your insurance
Absolutely.
Builder's risk, but what's nice about that is that it includes property that's there, that's going to become part of the building, but isn't yet part of the building, you know, so the building supplies, things along those lines. The builder's risk policy is a shorter term policy, you know, that's only for the length of construction. So the premium would be less because it's a shorter term period, but the rates are probably equal.
But again, building materials get stolen every now and again, not a lot, but if they're stolen under a building under construction, it's not covered because you don't have a builder's risk policy. If there is builder's risk, then, like you said, the supplies and associated benefits with that.
Big ticket item because some of your campers may find some nice building equipment sitting there, boy, these logs would be great for a campfire tonight, you know, so.
They're burning your treated SPF wood. That, maybe. Same as your build at 500. Whatever you choose. I mean, you could do 250, you could do 2,500, depending on the size of the building. Yep.
Yeah, a box of tools is, you know, made as hazardous as, you know, a roll of the copper wiring that's gonna be used for electricity.
Yep. Sir?
So with builder's risk, I know we had it when our building we did last summer, but I thought there was something different between stuff that's, until it's actually above the ground versus like the footings and foundation, which is below the ground, or how does that factor in? You know, if you have a hole up or whatever, put in a footing.
From a valuation perspective? Is that what you're?
Well, just the builder's risk in general, somebody getting hurt or the you know, cost of the materials or even, you know,
So this is one of these beautiful tangents again. When you guys are having, I understand that you build some of your own buildings probably, but when you have a contractor doing that building, this is where you request a certificate. I do not let gentlemen, I mean, I have a modest home, but I don't let them on my property. I'm a little bit probably more anal than everyone else. All right, I like this, educated, yes, that's good. Roofers, the gutter guy that did my gutters, I said, I need to, and he's like, well, I have GL. And I said, okay, well, where is your comp? He's like, well, I don't need comp. I'm an independent sole proprietor. Yeah, but if you fall off the roof, are you gonna sue me? I would like you to have comp, even if it's just a dummy policy with the state that states, I'm excluded, I'm paying the $900, I know I don't have comp coverage, work comp, I have no employees. I typically, this is just me, do not let those people work on my stuff. If you do not have GL and work comp, I don't let them work on my stuff. It's just safer for me. And again, I'm just a personal lines guy. You guys are a business, so anybody that is working on your campground, they're putting up a building. You do not have workers' comp on that business. It can be problematic if they fall off a roof while working for you.
I'm not talking about employees, I'm talking about,
The structure.
you know, we have temporary fence around it,
Yep.
it goes over, whatever.
Yep.
I guess that's what I was kind of asking.
Sure. So,
Two things. One is liability of other customers, and the other is for the risk of, builder's risk of, what's actually covered with the building, some above the ground or below the ground.
correct. So, like Jeff was saying, there's a completion date, a start and finish, and a number of what it's going to be valued at. Your campers, you have it fenced off, but typically there is no med pay on a campground. Because you guys have so much foot traffic, you have hundreds or even thousands of people at your campground. If grandma slips on a visible tree root and breaks her hip, med pay is no fault. After you get 10, 20, 30 of those claims, it goes against you. Even though it is no fault, it's still going against your loss ratio. If you pay $30,000 on your campground, that's why med pay is excluded. So people, if you're negligent for something, we will pay for it. If you're liable and become negligent, we will pay it under your GL. But if a gentleman has one too many beers, is walking through a woods on a non-defined trail to cut to his camper easily and trips on a root, I would defend that and say, we're not liable. You,
That's what that campground immunity bill was all about. That pays off. We suggested
yes. Yes. So like a grocery store, I always have a hard, we insure grocery stores as well. With all the foot traffic and the Wisconsin weather, inevitably people are going to trip and fall. And they can be serious claims that add serious frequency and severity to your loss ratio, which pressure on your premium upwards. So that's why asking an agent like Eric, that's why we normally ask to exclude MedPay. You can surely get it, but careful. I said he had been drinking, not drunk. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
One is that a claim, and they may go after you, and two, you pay. Or is that, you're on the nature trail? And I just got back from Hawaii, and the trails were
Rugged.
nothing but roots,
Yes.
you know, and, you know, I looked at that and said, oh my God, I can't believe let anybody walk through there.
Or we're at a state park or a national community.
Still, I have roots on my trail, and I'm not gonna take every one of them out.
Absolutely.
Somebody rides their bike to the nature trail and runs over those, and it's supposed to be a walking trail, am I liable for that?
Yes. But if you do not, then you would have to be negligent. I don't think you are negligent for an exposed tree root.
Okay, so we're probably okay.
You guys have lobbied, actually Waco has lobbied to get the immunity statute. That's why you guys are part of the association. You have somebody fighting for you. Absolutely. The inherent risk of where you're at. A nature trail is going to be uneven. It could be slippery if it's raining, the clay, and there could be roots. That's an inherent risk of walking on said trail. But if you have MedPay, and let's say you have a $5,000 limit, you're going to pay that $5. It's no fault. Nobody's going to argue. They're just going to pay it. She breaks her ankle. That $5 counts against your campground and me.
Right, but in Wisconsin, you're saying we wouldn't pay it, because you wouldn't be able to sue.
If there's MedPay, you can have, so I'm talking the two different coverages, GL and MedPay. MedPay is no fault. You can have MedPay or not. It's up to you and your agent to determine which one you want. Typically, people use MedPay to pay the portion of their health insurance deductible that they can't afford. That's what MedPay. Yes, sir. So-
I have an interesting one.
Yes, sir.
That sort of applies here, which is sort of a fun story. Got a call in December from a woman whose child was injured at my park, she said, earlier that summer. I knew nothing about this issue. Normally, of course, when you have an issue, you like to document it right away. I train the staff and look, you know.
That's that late report we were talking about.
Right, got no, out of the blue in December. And her son was injured at my park, golfing on my mini golf. Knew nothing about this, you know. And turns out, the boy took the golf club and ball back to his campsite and was teeing off and doinked it off of an oak tree. And boom, came back and hit him in the forehead.
Yes, I don't see liability there, but
I think it was prior, you know, maybe previous insurance, but before Eric, but so if I may have a follow-up there. And the insurance company said, well, you were not using it, you were a sporting activity, and you weren't using it in the prescribed way, so
for the intended purpose.
for the intended purpose, I'm not liable, we're not paying,
True.
which is awesome. I was
Yes.
so thrilled with that, but, you know.
Yes. We do good things every once in a while. we try. Oh,
Question on, I have a friend of mine, information that people start keep their dogs on a leash. They love their dogs. They bring their dog to camp, someone will have 2, 3, or some on show.
yes, sir.
You get this occasional person that thinks he's German Shepherd, just listens to everything I say, and it's just going all over, and you hear it after the fact. You haven't visualized it, you've seen it to stop it. What's your liability now if that dog tears into someone's high-class dog or bites somebody?
So fortunately for you, state of Wisconsin, it's strict liability for dogs on the owner. So that's the law. Strict liability on the dog owner. Now, if it's stray, that's something different. But if it's a dog owner that is letting his dog run wild, you have signs up to say, please leash your dog. I'm imagining it's in an amendment. You will leash your dog, okay? Yes, and that gentleman or lady lets the dog run free and it gets into it with another dog, bites a child, bites a man, bites a woman. The liability follows their personal liability. However, not everyone is insured. So all I'm saying is careful because they will look for a pocket. If it's a catastrophic bite, i.e. the face of a 5-year-old. I mean, those are sympathetic juries. You don't bring them to court. You try to settle them because things will get out of hand typically.
So your insurance, and every company, we don't back you up on that.
For the dog itself? Or we will defend you, number one, against the dog owner, but number two, she is primary and her personal liability follows that dog. Strict liability. We have no involvement whatsoever. The owner is personally responsible for everything. I had a claim in which a neighbor child there was a chain link fence and he was hitting the dog with a broom. And the dog bit him in the shoulder. You still owe for that. Strict liability, you owe for that. The personal liability of the dog owner owes to pay for the stitches to the boy. It's not a liked thing, but you still owe. Yes, sir.
This inherent risk thing, I mean, that's a pretty gray area, isn't it, as far as insurance goes? 'Cause I had last summer, it was nighttime, we had our pavilion open, doing a DJ, whatever. Kid comes running up and busted his arm, I mean, big time move. And I grabbed him, turned out he was running around in playgrounds area, which is right by where the pavilion and everything is, all over jumping pillows, whatever. Playing tag, broke his arm, took him to his family's campsite. Nobody was sober enough to take him to the hospital, so we called the ambulance, all this stuff. And then we get sued for 30 grand. And they paid it, our insurance company paid it without even saying anything, talking to me really about it or anything. They said inadequate lighting. Well, camper, I mean, I said, if I light up my whole campground, I'm not gonna have it here, you know? Maybe just for everybody else, that if you don't have it, they said, maybe it should have been in writing, any of our literature that we hand out, that specifically playgrounds are closed at dusk or at dark, but that's still.
Still a gray area because if they're running on the trail,
What I'm worried about is like, so that 30 grand, does that go against me, are my premiums gonna go up as far as that, stuff like that? I just don't know, where does that fall as far as them just saying?
so it is a loss against you and your carrier. So yes, typically the premiums reflect that. I would have cited, yeah, I would have cited negligent supervision for the children and argued, but it's subjective, like you said. And some people will pay it quickly. Some people will dig in and not. Adjusters are human beings too. They all have unique personalities, and some are more easygoing. I'm a little bit more type A and push a little bit on most things that I don't technically agree with.
So should I have pushed on that myself?
Involvement with you knew about the claim? It was. Yes, I mean, discussions with that GL adjuster would have maybe helped. Again, in the end, the insurance company can choose to pay it. Negligent lighting, or what did you say, inadequate? Inadequate lighting on a campground? I'm like, that's like inadequate lighting on a cornfield. I mean, it's pretty broad. Now, can it be cited? Of course.
But I mean, you're driving movie theaters too dark when the movie's playing, you know, people will sue you for anything.
Yes. So unfortunately, yes, it counts against both. Again, you can have that discussion with your agent that said, listen, this wasn't my fault. The carrier should have, and maybe that's a situation where you shop the insurance to find a carrier that another producer might know is a more aggressive carrier. I mean, agencies know carriers that are more aggressive and fight those type of torts versus others. Some people do just pay them. I admit that. That does happen. You'd like to think that they're each evaluated on their own merits, and that if there was not negligence, they would have, that would have been one, had I gotten it, I would have probably, I'm not doing it anymore, thank goodness, but had I got it, I would have said, whoa, again, you had mentioned that the parents had a beer. And so I would have said, I don't know how old this child was, less than 12? So of course, his parents are completely negligent supervision for their child.
Then again, if the child is very sympathetic, very clear-spoken, and the parents are as well, the claims adjuster could have said, you know, if we get in front of a jury, we're gonna end up paying $75,000 on this. So I know it sounds crazy, but that $30,000 may have been a bargain.
It's,
What time of day was that, right? Night? That happened.
Like, between 9 and 10.
Because I mean, some rules you have, okay, I'll just have to check.
Yeah, 10 o'clock's our quiet time, but we just assumed that.
yes, sir.
The other thing,
Oh.
you had asked about the inherent risk of loss. I mean, did the adjuster over there?
Absolutely. Not every carrier.
Reported to us about that. I mean, we assess it in-house, and then we pass that information on.
There are many carriers that dabble in campgrounds. We write hundreds. Actually, I would be willing to bet thousands.
We were there along with Waco when that bill was being lobbied in front of the state legislature.
So different levels of expertise, like Eric said. Some would just say, hey, it's a broken arm, we gotta pay this. They might not even know about the immunity statute. They would have never paid it.
I have signs in the playground that says children must be supervised, but they are all there and who knows who owns who.
Yes, sir.
If I get to the middle school kids, I can come out there and they'll be walking on this 8th grade, 10, 15 feet in the air. What are you doing up there? There's something to do up, then you come down.
Yes.
You know, now, I'm still, I won't be called a risk.
Could be,
I'm not supervising the supervisor, you know?
correct.
Well, we have a sign by our lake, no lifeguard on duty.
Yep. That goes back to the immunity.
You're on the lake. If somebody walks too deep, something happens, you're on a public lake at that point.
Absolutely. You don't own the lake. You own right to the water's edge. Just, sir.
I was wondering if there was any coverage for my township in their infinite wisdom have decided to bill the landowner for any fire department call that comes to your property. So in the middle of the night, somebody's carbon monoxide thing goes off in their trailer, they call the fire department, and I get the $500 bill.
Yeah, the fire department service charge.
Yeah. Is there any coverage for that?
Like if you had a grass fire, yes, there is. But if they just come, no, because there's no covered cause of loss.
Yeah, but the landowner gets the bill. Send it to the customer.
Yeah, so the customer on a personal lines basis has that coverage. Well, that's the how far do you want to go down the rabbit hole? Each personal lines policy package, I'll just speak for ours. Ours has a line item, fire department service charge.
Your customer could get that claim paid, you know, for free from them, but, you know, you're right, you're not gonna be very popular with sending the bill, but if you send them, if you say, hey, I got this bill when you called the fire department, your personalized policy probably has a coverage for this, can I send you the bill, and we handle it that way?
It depends on if it's a camper that you want to come back. If you don't want to come back, send the bill. Yes, sir. Okay.
Somebody had an accident with a golf cart, you're in somebody's car, you're in somebody's kid.
Okay.
Is it their policy, their person who rented policy, who should be paying for that, or can they come back after you?
They can come back after us, but they should have personal liability under their homeowners. But once again, not everyone is insured. And the person on the personal lines, even if they are insured, they may not be insured correctly, right? I mean, if they have a subpar policy, we only sell
Policy include coverage like that, or was there more of the homeowner?
So again, transitioning between two different coverages, our personal lines Milestone Gold, our best product, covers a golf cart anywhere in the world. I mean, you could drive it on a public road, you can drive it through a campground, and you are covered for liability wherever you're at, versus on the golf course. typically you're insured while you're on the course. You take it off the course, any taken off your premise liability, you need it on an inland marine form because now you're off your premise. If they were to take that cart, which you probably tell them not to, but I have an idea that they've probably crossed a public road at some time with that cart. So you run the risk there, yes, that they can obviously come after you, yes. I mean, you can build it into your waiver, correct, Eric? Yes.
At the very least, you'd be named in a lawsuit. They would have to defend to make sure that the golf cart was maintained properly. They would look at your instructions you gave when you gave the golf cart.
The age of the driver. Are you letting a 6-year-old drive the golf cart? Then all of a sudden the liabilities. Okay, terrific. Yes, sir.
I want to revisit the dog issue.
Yes, sir.
I've heard the term aggressive breed used before. Are you still backing us when said German Shepherd, Rottweiler, I don't remember what all those aggressive breeds were. Are you still backing us when something like that happens?
Yes, unless you own the dog, then no. I do not want you guys to have Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, Chows, Akitas, any Staffordshire Terrier, any fighting dog, the Argentinian Mastiffs.
Saying is, it's okay for our customers to have these things, but we can't personally have it.
Please, I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying I might not be able to insure you if you have a prohibited breed. Some people are very vehement. I have a very close friend who has a 150-pound pit. My boys wrestle with them. They've known her since she was little. But when you see her, people walk to the other side of the road. And again, it's all about how they're brought up, but they are still, what a pit bull bites, it's kind of like trucking. What a dump truck hits, it kills. What a pit bull bites, it's not nipping. It tears chunks. So that's a lot of the jaw strength is why we don't like in the aggressive tendencies. We will insure German Shepherd. We will insure Dobermans, Huskies, but there are what we talked about, Rots, Pits, that Terrier mix, anything like that, we just don't want to deal with.
We got a guy who walks through town with a pit bull, and always carries a great big stick. So why did he allow him to walk through town? If he's carrying that thing, it's not. You need to defend it.
Certain townships do have ordinances that you can't own a pit bull. I mean, that does happen, but it's legislative within the town and the city council. So, unfortunately.
I just what you were saying before there, my insurance company currently will not let me, they will not cover any bike rentals or dog cover rentals for that reason because they can leave and just go downtown. Was there a coverage or something separate for that or?
I know a carrier who would cover it. Oh, I apologize. Thank you. This is what I hoped for, just a Q&A, and it went back and forth. Thank you very much for your attendance. I hope you got a lot out of it. Appreciate it.